These are the two dangers. First, heat and blast, which is followed by fallout. The heat and blast is so severe that it can kill and can destroy buildings for up to 5 miles from the explosion. Fallout is dust that is sucked up from the ground by the explosion. It can be deadly dangerous. It rises high in the air and can be carried by winds for hundreds of miles before falling to the ground.
Is that sound
I'm
effect
terrified.
entirely necessary?
Yeah,
That's
well, yeah, I mean, that is a public
Yeah.
information advert, isn't it?
That's like-
I mean, it's striking.
We did a whole thing about public information ads. They were a massive part
I've
of
done
life
a
in the
section
70s.
on a
and
show
there's-
as
yeah.
well about how some of those adverts were utterly terrifying.
Yeah, but they don't do them anymore.
No.
But they were our childhood. They were there
Is that
all
our
the time.
woke society?
No, that's another argument for another day. Now, that's how the government explained the effects of nuclear explosion in its Protect and Survive information campaign in the 70s. Well, the Times Science Editor Tom Whipple has written about an updated view of the effects of the nuclear war today. We can speak to him now. Morning, Tom.
Morning, hello.
So I'm always keen to cling on to good news. Is there any in this study? Will everything be okay if there's a nuclear explosion?
This is a study finding, to many people's surprise, that nuclear war is a bad idea. And it will result in a number of poor outcomes for the world. The really interesting thing about this study, it's put numbers on effects that we knew would occur, but these effects are secondary effects. They're not the effects that you're hearing about so much in that public information film. If we talk about nuclear war, we think about the people who die immediately, the nuclear fallout in the area, the destroyed and ravaged countries, but that's not necessarily the worst bit, because there's been a growing appreciation, by which I mean for the last 40 years, that what would happen is, as with big volcanic eruptions or meteor strikes, you'd chuck a lot of soot up really high into the air, where rather than falling down, it would stay there. And it would be enough that it would block out the sun. So you're talking about drops of 10, 15, 20 degrees. You're talking about mass crop failure. And what this study has done is shown that really, in the event of a US-Russia war, unless you're somewhere like Australia or Argentina, which largely because of their low population density, could probably make enough food for the people there. Forget about the sort of being incinerated in an instant or, dying of terrible radiation poisoning. Most of the world's just going to go of starvation. And even if you talk about a regional nuclear war, we talk about India, Pakistan, the rest of the world would be far worse hit in the long run than India and Pakistan would by an India-Pakistan war, because you'd be talking about a billion deaths elsewhere. On top of the 100 million from the initial nuclear war, just in these terms.
So in a sense, is the point here that it doesn't actually matter where the nuclear bombs fall. The effect of enough nuclear bombs will basically, it's like what killed the dinosaur, like an asteroid event, changed the climate, killed the dinosaurs. The same sort of thing would happen in a nuclear war.
Yeah, you're talking about 10 years in which you essentially can't grow things. So it's even more than mutually assured destruction. It's sort of an even greater sense of insanity than that. And yes, the brinksmanship in say, India and Pakistan is not just a matter for the Indian subcontinent. It's something that is essentially a threat to the rest of the world to a really high degree.
Can this be mitigated, Tom? Because ultimately, if we know this is going to happen, I mean, God, it'd be awful in every single way as you've outlined, but presumably human beings aren't dinosaurs. We have opposable thumbs, we have technology. We could use that technology to find ways of constructing food sources that aren't dependent on the sun. Is that a possibility, that actually there's something we can build as a reserve for the day in which the sun goes black?
There is, and some scientists have argued this, not just because of this, but because of meteor strike or supervolcanoes or those sorts of things. What we could do is think about things like aquaculture, growing seaweed, growing mushrooms, building vast greenhouses. These things are feasible. Some scientists are really worried about the idea of having that as an insurance policy because it makes the prospect of nuclear war appear more survivable. And obviously, fundamentally, nuclear war is a bad thing, and we shouldn't have it.